Hey, this is Gina Grad.
Hi, this is Teresa Strasser.
Hi, everyone. This is Mike Errico.
Hey there. This is Casey Cavalier.
I'm Rocky Rose.
And you are listening to The Jay Franzi Show.
Lucky you.
Welcome to The Jay Franzi Show. A behind-the-curtain look at the entertainment industry with insights you can't pay for and stories you've never heard. Now, here's your host, Jay Franzi.
Well, hello and welcome to the show. I am Jay Franzi, and if you are new here, this is where we take a deep dive into the entertainment industry to provide you with valuable insights and entertaining stories. This week, we get to talk with one of Nashville's finest producers and engineers. We get to talk with Bob Bullock. We'll talk to him about the pivotal role Kenny Rogers played in his career, what it was like to work with John Snyder to release a song a week for a year, and we'll take a deep dive into his time working with Mutt Lange to produce some of Shania Twain's greatest projects. Now, when I say Bob is one of Nashville's finest producers, I mean Bob is truly one of the industry's finest. I've had the pleasure to work alongside Bob for several years, and I learned so much during that time. We've remained friends ever since, and I can't wait to talk with him tonight. So if you'd like to join in, comment, or fire off any questions, please head over to jfranzi.com. And now let's get started. Bob, sir, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Jay.
You, my friend, are probably the most referenced person on this show. Every guest we have on here talks about you at one point or another. So it's good to finally get you back on the show and get to hear some of these stories that we keep talking about.
Oh, that's great. At first, when you said that, I wasn't sure how to react,
Oh, no, trust me, none of it's good. So I want to make sure we have time, give you a chance to clear your name a little bit.
Okay, there you go.
All right, well, let's just go ahead and get started. Can you tell me what it was about working with Kenny Rogers that was so pivotal in your career?
Okay. Working with Kenny Rogers led me directly to Nashville, and that was unplanned. So, I grew up in Los Angeles. I was working in Los Angeles. In fact, actually working up in Northern California with the Doobie Brothers. And there's a history behind that. The studios that Kenny Rogers purchased, lion's share, had originally been ABC Records and ABC Studios, and I had worked there. So I had a history with, those particular studios. So I got a call from somebody that was there when Kenny Rogers was taking over that business and asked to join the staff. So did that. It was a wonderful experience. So met everybody from the first edition. Terry Williams from the first edition was managing the studio for Kenny, and Ken Vassy was running his publishing. And at that time, I was really had my sights set on, going up to Northern California, to San Francisco, to the Bay Area. And through Kenny, I just started meeting people from Nashville. People from Nashville would come in because that was a home base for him on a lot of his earlier records. And started getting calls really because of that to come to Nashville. And I just fell in love with it and moved here in 1984.
Was there much of a difference between working there and working in Nashville?
Yeah, there was a lot of differences, honestly. Well, one thing I would say, Nashville has always been a songwriter community and a real small condensed area for the studio musicians. So not unlike Los Angeles in that regard, but the Nashville way of making country music was very efficient. Budgets, were a lot tighter in the late 70s, or I guess it was early 80s when I first started coming here. So the one thing I noticed right away when I came was that I thought I'd, learned a few things, but I had to really get my chops more together for speed, accuracy, being ready for everybody. And I think we had a little more laid back way of working in Los Angeles. But it was exciting, so I liked all the artists. I liked everybody at the studios. So really, I've never looked back.
Do you feel like Nashville still works that way?
To some extent, Nashville has a way of creating music that is very efficient. Studio musicians, singers, producers, songwriters, everyone, it's a pretty well-oiled machine, But when I came here, I also saw there was a great opportunity for evolving, I guess. So the Nashville studios were definitely, to me, behind the times of Los Angeles and New York, especially. But there was a kind of in that early 80s, there was a surge of popularity, and the labels that had Nashville divisions were putting more money into making the records, which gave money for the recording studios to improve. And in those days, I was working not exclusively, but mostly for Jimmy Bowen. And Jimmy Bowen had come from Los Angeles from producing Sinatra and Dean Martin, the whole Rat Pack era. And so he was really instrumental in get higher budgets and more technology. So about the time that I came to Nashville was this kind of, I guess, the start of the digital age of multi-track digital. And so there was a leapfrog thing that went on really in the early 80s where the Nashville studios, in my opinion, were jumping ahead. So it was a real exciting time, honestly.
Well, you mentioned that, and I know you've had a very long career, over 40 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about the opportunities in Nashville when you first arrived, what were some of those opportunities, and how do you see the area progressing?
I guess the way I would say, for me personally, coming in and working for Jimmy Bowen, all the music for country, all the music for the country format, country genre really was done in Nashville. I mean, there were very few exceptions back in that 70s and 80s period. And I started coming here in 81. So I realized that it was really kind of a small group. I managed to fit into the system, fortunately for me, but there was a small group of us really that were creating this whole genre. And with the technology playing, in my opinion, an advancement of new recording consoles, new tape machines, newer outboard gear, things like that, it made it exciting for me. And another thing I didn't anticipate is my background in music has always been what I call the more organic stuff. I mean, recording live musicians, recording orchestral dates. That's what I did before I came to Nashville. As music was starting to change with more programming and drum machines, things of that sort in Los Angeles and New York, and I was going back and forth some, so it wasn't like I'd left all that totally behind. It was just I would go back and forth some, but Nashville remained as this place where 6 or 8 musicians would come into the studio and we would record live. That was perfect for me. It wasn't something I anticipated happening, but I was able to continue doing what I really loved. You might say my forte, even to this day, really more in Nashville than I would probably in other communities.
I think that's where you shine. I've had the opportunity to see you work for some time. And I think when you have a live band in front of you, 6 to 8 guys that are all playing at the same time, and you've got all those moving pieces, I think that's really where you stand out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel that everybody kind of finds what their comfort zone is, what excites them. That's for me. So I'm as crazy as it might sound, because there's a lot of tension that comes with all that, orchestra dates or rhythm sections. It's exciting. And I guess just like being front of house for a live concert, it's crazy intense, but if you're cut out for that, it's also probably very fulfilling.
What do you find to be the challenging times?
Trying to sometimes be the calming component of the team, the producer. I felt that quite a lot in the arts. You've participated in a lot of records, a lot of music. I mean, the passion for all this creates a lot of tension, pressure. Sometimes the intent is always everyone wants to make the best record they can do, write the best song they can do, best performance, best vocal, all that. But in doing that, it can get, kind of intense. And it felt like sometimes as a producer and an engineer, I have to try to be the calming force so that we actually get from point A to point B.
Right. No, that makes sense. So what were the key lessons you learned in California that helped you out when you first moved to Nashville?
Well, I had a lot of experience with doing all, these big bands and orchestral stuff and all that. And I had a lot of experience with different consoles, SSLs, APIs, Neves, Tridents, and all that, and all the tape formats. So I would say that some of the studios were a little bit kind of lagging behind at that period of time in Nashville. So I think I was able to help be part of bringing some newer ideas. Like, here, this is available to us. If we had this console, we could do, these things that you haven't been able to do before, for example. So yeah, that just was really challenging and exciting for me. I felt like I was part of seeing this genesis of Nashville growing.
No, I can understand that too. If you come from a place that's a little bit ahead technology-wise, it kind of gives you an edge, not only to know how to use the equipment, but to know what's coming in the future for Nashville and be part of it. Technology is still to this day advancing, and it's advancing at a fast rate. Mm-hmm. What are the pivotal moments that really made a difference to you, that really stand out technology-wise?
Oh, boy. Well, thankfully, I've always embraced change. If you don't embrace change, right? I don't think you're cut out for this stuff, because it's changed so dramatically. Pivotal points, let's see. Well, for many years, I was working with analog consoles, analog gear, microphones. Some technologies changed, but basically not as dramatic. But, analog tape. So the only things that were really changing for me for maybe 15 years were going from 8-track to 16-track to 24-track to locking up to 24 tracks. So the evolution, just kind of like watching how things have changed since we've had the smartphones, the evolution, things didn't change that rapidly. There might be some new outboard gear, some advancements in a large format console. But for many years, I guess going into the early 80s, there was a lot of consistency. Once we got into the digital tape formats, the 32 tracks, the Sony Dash machines, 48 tracks. So I guess going from analog to the multi-track digital machines was one pivotal point. Then maybe the next thing that I recognized that was changing things dramatically was the potential for home studio stuff, ADATs, things like that people could record multi-tracks at home and they could put several machines together. And then probably somewhere in the mid 90s with Pro Tools, the digital workstation stuff. So those to me are the pivotal changes, going from analog to multi-track digital to then, finally where we are now, just like Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic, and all that.
Do you enjoy that transition of technology?
I do to some extent. I mean, what I've found, especially as I started getting into education, teaching, and everything, is I personally don't do too much differently on the recording side of things than I've always have. The analog tape has gone away for me for the most part. So Pro Tools specifically, or that type of recording, has become the tape machine. But it really still to this day, generally when I work, I'm working at a studio that has a large analog console, mostly Pro Tools. Pro Tools is our tape machine, and the same outboard gear that's been around for decades. And then the thing that's changed really dramatically is, my home studio is all digital. It's all in the box. I'm a new window user. I have a Pro Tools system also. And my preference for mixing is new window, but certainly recognize that, all the major companies have, stellar products today. So yeah, the mixing side, the post side, editing and all that is completely different. I used to cut tape, analog tape, and those days are long gone. But for me personally, the recording side is very much the same. Now, I'm not really a programmer. For my, friends, my peers that are doing program music and all that, that's a whole nother component to this.
So you have worked on thousands of projects, but before we get to that point, I'd like you to talk about one of your more recent projects. You were working with John Snyder, and for those who don't know, he played Bo Duke in Dukes of Hazzard. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us what it was like working with him and what that project was like?
It's been over about a 3-year period of 3 years period of time, I guess. I had originally worked with John soon after they ended the Dukes of Hazzard show, which I guess was late 80s. I don't remember exactly, but after he left the show, they finished the Dukes of Hazzard. He's always been a great singer. I mean, he's a very talented singer. And so he came to Nashville and landed a record deal with MCA Records. Jimmy Bowen signed him. And right out of the chute, his first album, we started having #1 records with him. So he was doing, really well. I couldn't tell you how many records I did with him through that period of time, but we did quite a few. And couldn't even tell you the timeline of when that changed, but he started going back into doing his acting career more. He had shows like Smallville series he was doing, for example. He was kind of rocking between his singing career and his TV and movie career. So I think he was leaving the music kind of just sitting a little bit on hold for a while. And I got a call right out of the blue in 2017 that he wanted to go in and record some new stuff because he still had a very large music fan base to go along with all his television and film. And he had promised his fans that he was going to release a song every week of the year for 2018.
It's insane.
That's a monumental thing. So the phone call went from me thinking, oh, wow, John, haven't seen you in a long time. We did one album between the MCA records and then in that period that he had produced independently. But when he called me, I thought, oh, we're going to probably go in and cut a couple of songs. So he said, well, we're going to be recording 52 songs to be released next year. So this was in, I think, September of 2017. Okay. So luckily he and Paul Lime, who was co-producing the project with him, is also an incredible drummer, great talent. They had already been finding material and kind of brainstorming this. So in, I think it was in October, we started recording to get some stuff that we could have delivered starting week 1 of January 2018. And then we just kept recording throughout the year. So by the end of the year, we had all 52 songs done. And we also in that year did a Christmas album, which I think is really a great record. And we redid his greatest hits and made an acoustic version from the MCA greatest hits, re-recorded that. So I think in starting 2017, 2018, 2019, I think there was 11 albums we did. They weren't simple productions. I mean, this was big time stuff, big bands, big productions. And it was a lot of fun.
That is crazy. Mm-hmm. When you went in to do the acoustic album, how many people were playing on it? I mean, it wasn't just guitar vocal. What was the instrumentation like?
Oh, it was drums. When I say acoustic, it wasn't quite his early stuff with MCA was in the late 80s, early 90s, whenever that period of time was. It was a little bigger productions of, more electric layering parts, things like the electric guitar, maybe some strings, some synthesizer stuff. So they were the productions that were, I guess, appropriate at that time, for a full studio band record. So our greatest hits, that's more greatest hit steel, I think is what it was called. But it's the acoustic stuff is just drums, bass, acoustic guitars, piano, vocals, just a different version of those songs, a lighter version of those songs.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that one. I don't think I've heard that.
Yeah, John's, pretty incredible talent, really. I mean, he can sing a lot of different styles, and he loves everything that he does. So it's all been fun. But it's always great to take a record and then just have the same artist do a different version of that, and in our case, doing something that's more acoustic. It's kind of like an unplugged thing, I guess.
Well, very cool. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Can you tell us what it was like working with Shania Twain?
Shania Twain. Well, yeah, those were good times, good records for sure. I had worked with Mutt Lange on a project prior to Shania Twain, an album with an artist. Her name was Stevie Vaughan. And I think she was touring with Elton John, I believe, in those days. But I got to know, Mutt a little bit and met Shania. She had already done a record here in Nashville, I think on Polydor. And there's a whole long story to all that, but Mutt met Shania and they started collaborating, dating, and, writing together. And so I met Shania really through that period of time. So where she'd come over and hang out with us at the studio. We were working on a different project. And then that led to him producing her next album. And it was called The Woman in Me. And that mostly was done in Canada, The Woman in Me record. And it just took off. I mean, I think, I don't remember how many hits there were, but I think it went to like 10 or 12. I think it was like 12 million units. So the next record was the Come On Over record. And that one, I don't think we did any of that in Canada. So that was recorded here in Nashville and then also in New York at Mutt Studio in upstate New York and different studios here in Nashville. And that album was pretty intense and pretty amazing in so many ways because she had a lot of success with this Woman in Me record. It was her second album, but they didn't really have enough songs that were hits and everything to go tour with. So they decided to record, was it 16? I think it was 16 songs. I don't think it was 19. I don't remember exactly now, but I think it was 16 songs on the Come On Over record. And the idea was since they had so much momentum, to get those songs on the radio and get it out there so that when she opened her tour, which was from the Come On Over record, between the three albums, especially the latter two, she wouldn't need an opening act, basically. She wouldn't have to open. She would be the lead, and it worked. I think there was 9 singles off the Come On Over record, which was kind of unheard of.
That's an impressive way of doing it.
Yeah. And so they just, it was a really fun record to work on. It was great to work with Mutt on that. The songs were great. He and Shania wrote all of them. Then that led to the Up album, which was kind of very unique in that the Woman in Me album was pretty traditional as far as it was new music by Shania and Mutt, and it was well produced. It was a great record and had great songs and hits. When we got to the Come On Over record, Mutt was doing, there was more variations of mixes and stuff for different markets and everything, and they really did a lot with the Come On Over record. For the Up record, he took it to a whole nother level. It was kind of like, in film, The Lord of the Rings or something. It was like we had 3 versions of the Up album. So there was a version that was kind of the more organic country record. I think that was the green album, the blue album, and then there was the red one. I think was the one that was all the same songs, same vocals, but more pop production. Okay, and then the third variation of that was the same songs that I had nothing to do with those at all. He had a couple of producers in India, I think, that made a world music version of those songs. So really, when that album came out, it went to three very different markets, country, pop, and world music.
Now, that's very strategic. Was that his plan to be that strategic with the releases?
That I couldn't answer. I would say that his camp, Mutt's machine of, his track record speaks for itself. If you look up Mutt's discography, some very, very monumental records by a lot of big artists. I just think that the time was good for where sales were with CDs and radio, and this was before streaming. But I just think whoever came up with it as a team or whatever, it was pretty brilliant. Her first tour was a huge success too.
Oh, that whole thing sounds like a very good plan. I mean, whoever thought of it was very smart for doing so.
Yeah, definitely.
There's not enough information about Mutt out there. I mean, he doesn't do many interviews. He doesn't talk to many people. But he does have a very particular reputation of being very hardworking. Mm-hmm. Did you find any of that in the studio with him?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's an understatement, Jay. But
I'm trying to be nice, Bob.
Yeah, I'm actually, but I like that. See, that's the thing. You have to know where you fit in on things. So my early days of engineering at ABC Records, I was assisting Roger Nichols on Steely Dan records.
Another great engineer.
Oh yes, yeah. Roger was brilliant. I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from a lot of people. I was very, very blessed. But yeah, he was great. That whole experience with working with mostly it was Donald Fagen and Walter Becker, but Steely Dan. I mean, we could do 10 segments just on Steely Dan records. That everything was so meticulously done. Everything was at such a slow. When I talk about LA, I'm not trying to make it sound like it was a lazy pace. It wasn't that at all. There was a lot of intensity. It's just that there was a lot of time to go over things. So as an engineer, you had a lot of time to get sounds because they weren't just going to, come in and just bang out a track in one take and all that. So Steely Dan helped me be ready for working with Mutt Lange. Because Mutt's very, very meticulous with his work. I absolutely admire his passion and stamina and just, his attention to detail, But if you're not geared for that, you wouldn't have a good time.
Right. And I appreciate it. I like that kind of work. But can you give us an example of what we're kind of alluding to?
I could probably give you a lot. Well, okay, I'll give you a good example. On the Come On Over record, we did a bunch of guitar overdubs with Dan Huff in New York. And days and days, of guitar overdubs and everything was great. And Mutt called me and Man, I Feel Like a Woman was the song. Mutt called me. I was back in Nashville and working on something else. And he said, the song, Man, I Feel Like a Woman. I don't really think that the solo is exactly what I want it to be. It's just a short little, I don't know, depending on how you count, I guess a little, 4-bar thing, now it wasn't a long solo. And Dan did a great job, of course, like he always does, but Mutt just was thinking he wanted to hear something different. So he wanted a slide guitar on it. So we got Larry Byram, who's also, fantastic guitar player, very accomplished slide guitar player. And we went into Emerald Studios, and Mutt and Shania had engagements in New York. They had something they were doing in New York, in Manhattan. So we rigged up a talkback system from the hotel they were at. And Larry came in and we set him up, and we had him do just countless variations with Mutt coaching him of, different ideas and lines and notes to redo the solo, which was probably about a 3-hour session. And then I sent those back on safety reels. I sent all the takes we had done of the slide parts and the punch ins and all that back to Mutt. And then he spent several hours, from what I was told, I wasn't with him on that, putting together the two guitar players. So part of the solo was Dan Huff and part of the solo was Larry Byram. So I don't know, maybe 12 hours easily of studio time went into just doing that. I mean, that would just be one example. But then you hear the end result, it's just brilliant. It's all so perfect. So to me, it's always worth all that. That's why that's never been a problem for me, because it's the end result that matters. He just wanted to hear something unique, and that's what it ended up being.
Does he understand the pressure he's putting on people at that moment?
I've worked with Mutt a lot, over the years, and I wouldn't really even call it pressure. I mean, what I would say is he's always been very pleasant to work with. Okay. But it's tough on you as far as I guess the intensity isn't like high pressure. Anyone's upset, just doing things over and over again. But I always found him to, even with, all the musicians we work with, let them tell him if they needed a break or, hey, I need to walk away from this. He was always very patient around me on all that. So, and me included, because, sometimes you're working on the same part over and over and over again. I mean, sometimes all day, and it's tough on a musician that's just getting a little numb to it. They have to get away from it. Same thing for, an engineer, but he was always so pleasant about it. To me, it was okay, whatever we have to do. Everyone was getting paid. Everyone was treated well. And the end result kind of says it all to me.
Absolutely. What was your most memorable moment from that?
I mean, there's so many. It was fun working on their studio in New York. It was their home studio, which was pretty over the top. So I spent about a month there with them, and that was pretty exciting. But his productions and records, kind of have gone all over the world. I mean, even for the Up record, I wasn't part of that part of it, but they did string dates in Milan, Italy, and kind of traveled, the world, making these records. But on the Up record, he took myself and a group to Nassau, to the Bahamas, and we did a lot of overdubs. That was about 3 or 4 weeks also. Yeah, that was a real exciting time. It was kind of like we just all camped out.
Was it all work?
Yeah, it was for me. It wasn't for the musicians, because everybody was kind of switching off of myself. And put it this way, us engineers, we're kind of going around the clock. It was very long hours, 9 in the morning till 8 in the morning. The whole experience started with a brownout after having everything all ready to go on a Sunday, coming in Monday morning, and the Pro Tools card had fried during the night.
How did we rectify that?
Well, luckily for me, Mutt was very understanding of things, and I had to call him at 9 a.m. and tell him that even though everything was working perfect, checked, double checked, triple checked, and all that Pro Tools, was giving us an unhappy face. And we had all these double scale musicians that had flown in that were supposed to start at 10 a.m. So all he said to me is, well, just do whatever it takes. So I guess I could tell that story now. We we were in Nassau, and there was nowhere to get things like that. We called England, we called everywhere. And so in Miami, we finally figured out through talking to tech support and everything, what was wrong. We had a couple cards that had fried. So in Miami, we had to purchase these new cards and get them shipped to us. Well, it wasn't that far in miles to get them shipped, but it was a different country. So it was supposed to go through customs, okay, and all that. So we had to get somebody to get on a plane with these cards in a suitcase and get there and then retrieve the cards so we could get them in the thing, because we didn't have time to go through customs. Would have been like delayed a week or something for something like that, So we got that all taken care of. And believe it or not, because we had been so ready, staying up all night the night before and all that, by 2:00, the band was in the room recording. So it was a frantic, like 4 hours. That's how
Can you picture somebody trying to get cards like that onto an airplane now?
No, it wouldn't happen today. No, those in those days, it was still a lot looser in those days. But
That's
yeah, but those are things that we didn't even, I didn't even anticipate at first. Like, okay, well, just send us the cards. It's not that far to Miami, but it wasn't that simple. So
right, not that easy to just pull that.
but we got it done. Mutt was happy. So
All right, well, let's go ahead and shift gears one more time here. Can you tell me what it was like working with the Tubes?
the Tubes, okay, that's going back even a little further.
Yeah, but what a cool band and album, and I mean, just they are amazing.
Oh, they were. I first worked with with them on their "What Do You Want From Live" record. I think it was called. That would have been the '70s. I was at Kendon Recorders. They had recorded some shows. I forgot the venue now. It was in England somewhere. I forgot what the venue was. And Peter Henderson was producing them. And he was a protege of Jeff Emmerich. Peter was. And Peter and I were about the same age, actually. We're both like 22, I guess it was. And he went from working with Jeff Emmerich and the band Supertramp to he was producing the Tubes. And it was a live record we did. They recorded all these shows. They brought all the tapes to Los Angeles, and we edited together and mixed the album at Kendon Recorders. And so that was my first, time working with them and the whole band. And it was all live. I mean, it was like they kept trying to do overdubs and everything, and the record company was emphatic, was A&M, and they were emphatic. They wanted to be able to say it was a live recording, and so it was a live recording. It was a very good record. They were really great musicians. But typically, if anyone, as we were assembling these shows from, I think it was 5 nights, they wanted to redo parts and stuff, and so we would let them do it, and then the record company wouldn't let us use any of that.
Did the band know?
I don't remember that now. I don't remember, but it was a great record, and it was a lot of fun. And we, assemble. I always loved doing live records like that and assembling different shows and audience responses. And, those days, everything was so labor intensive. I mean, we spent weeks putting together, the recording, even for it to all be live. And, there's some other little side stories I could tell you about that, but then jump forward to, while I was working at Lion Share Studios several years later, David Foster started producing the Tubes. And I think the album he did before I worked with them again with Humberto Gatica was The Completion Backward Principle. Also a great record, great production, songs, and all that. So they came in, I think the tracks, a lot of the tracks that were already recorded, I think, when they started the album we're talking about. It had She's a Beauty on it, and that was called From the Inside, I think. I had worked a lot with Humberto Gatica also, another great engineer, brilliant. I learned a lot from him. By then, in those days, Humberto was even throwing me work, when he was double booked. So even on that particular record, of the Tubes, we were working in a couple of studios simultaneously. And so Humberto might be, in one studio doing overdubs, and I was in another studio with one of the other guys doing overdubs. And then we mixed the album in Studio A at Lion Share. And on that part of it, I assisted Humberto. But yeah, they were a lot of fun, real creative. They were all art students. They were all artists. They did their own artwork for their records. I mean, they talented musicians, and they painted murals. They did all this. It's a really, really creative group.
So when they're in the studio, is it different than Nashville? Do they play as a band live, or do they do their basic tracks and then overdub everything? My LA experiences, and that's where I had to really change gears a lot for Nashville, but then I did embrace it. But the records that we're talking about now, and then also working with Mutt Lange, the same thing, really. There's a spontaneity in Nashville of making country music, specifically country music, and I embrace it. I love it. It's not speed for the sake of speed. It's
getting everything in there, getting an arrangement worked out and recording it, capturing it before you get past it and lose it. It's a feel thing. It's a mojo thing, with country music. All the records I did in Los Angeles prior and since, or even in Nashville with, maybe other genres of music, were more of you would bring a whole band in, most of the time and get things started. But then, there would be a lot more time, bigger budgets, more time to spend revisiting guitar solos, revisiting parts, adding things, subtracting things. In the days of like Steely Dan, everything, cutting entire tracks and having them fantastic, and then decide they want to make a few changes, and then going in with a band and recording them completely. So we did a lot of those things too. And you have to keep in mind that, until like Pro Tools, and that way of working, that type of editing and all, we had, very, very limited technology for a lot of things. I mean, you couldn't just cut and paste stuff. I mean, you could edit. I mean, some of us got pretty good at editing tape and everything, but you couldn't undo and redo and move everything around. And you couldn't just change tempos and keep the same pitch. We had to vary speed things. And so there were so many things that we had to recut stuff over. If you want to change the key, you're not going to just go in pitch and time and change the key. So I'd just say that it's not really so much maybe a New York, LA, Nashville thing. It's probably more of genres of music, more pop type stuff, R&B and everything. Maybe we, just spent more time chipping at the marble.
So when you're working with a band like the Tubes, is there a lot of experimentation then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The first record I worked on with them, I only worked on 2 records with them. They were both really fun, very different. What I did with Peter, that was capturing, editing together. Real work on that was assembling a live record. So it wasn't an experimentation. It was like that was their live shows, and we just put all that together and then mixed it. From the Inside record with David Foster was, he's a brilliant producer, and he kind of kept everybody in the rails, you might say. But all the musicians, they all contributed and they had ideas, and we tried different things. And so, there's just kind of gets more pop stuff. There might be just more experimentation. You're creating more illusion. I remember Bruce Swedeen's one time, hopefully everybody knows who Bruce Swedeen was, Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones, fantastic engineer. I heard him say one time that there's kind of 2 basic styles of engineering and producing music. And one is capturing, performances, and the other one is creating illusion. So like the stuff they did with Michael Jackson was more like trying different things and this or that, because you're kind of creating more of an illusion, a theatrical piece. And then if you're going in and recording a country band, George Strait or something, it's more of like capturing just the moment and the spirit of the song and everything. So, when you're doing the theatrical stuff, it definitely takes you to a lot of different experimentation.
That's a really good point too, because we talk about a lot of the projects you've worked on, and a lot of it comes from the engineering point of view, but you're also a producer. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us what style of producing that you typically take on?
I like working with bands a lot. I mean, even though a lot of my engineering credits certainly have been working with, artists, entertainers, and then with studio musicians. But I do like working with bands. This past year, I've been working with a band called Union Gray, based out of Denver, Colorado. And with just a few exceptions, they're really a self-contained band. Done some stuff with them with studio musicians, augmenting it also. I just produced a couple songs with an artist out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, that wrote these songs that are a song specifically for a film that hopefully is in development through Netflix. And he wrote a title song for it called The Preacher, and came to me with, the song to produce that for the film and make it real visual and everything. So his name is Merv Aylesbury. So that was specifically for that. So I guess my forte, my interest is working with bands, like organic stuff. Even most of the work I get from mixing even today is mostly, people that have, musicians in front of microphones and things of that sort that's recorded. And that's kind of my main format. I also produced and engineered a record with all studio musicians that was like it was a self-contained band called the HMB Players for High Mountain Breezes. And that's been getting really a lot of streaming. In fact, I was just looking the other day and, we're up to over 400,000 streams on that, completely independent. And that was working with a band also, but the band is all studio musicians and singers that Bruce Tarletsky, who formed the label and gave us the means to produce this record, co-wrote some songs, and then we also did some covers. But basically, we had the opportunity just to go in with these songs and make them our own. Recut the famous Simon and Garfunkel Bridge Over Troubled Water, for example, and did a very different arrangement that I have to credit really to Chris Lusinger, did the musical arrangements. And I'd encourage you to look that up because there's a lot of great musicians and singers on it. And we just got to go in there and like play in the sandbox. I think we made a good record.
I'll have to check that one out. And Chris is awesome too. I mean, he's just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, sir. Well, we do this thing here we call Unsung Heroes, where we take a moment to shine the light on somebody who typically doesn't get that much credit. Do you have anybody who's worked behind the scenes for you or to support you that you'd like to shine a little light on?
Oh, well, that goes way back. I've, I guess I'll go way back. Playing guitar in bands in high school and everything, and I wanted to get into audio and engineering. It was very difficult to break the doors down, So when I was old enough to drive, I started going to recording studios and knocking on doors, and that doesn't get you too far. But I met a gentleman. In fact, I just talked to him very recently. His name is Bob Diavola, that was working for ABC Records, and through a longer story, I was introduced to him. I was only 18 years old, I think. And he invited me to come down to ABC recording studios and, just look around and everything. And of course, I knew that's exactly what I wanted to do and, where I wanted to be. So he told me I could come down anytime, after hours, weekends. And he just put me in a studio with, outtakes and things that I couldn't wreck. And he'd let me just play and kind of mentor me a little bit. And, I don't think he realized that I was going to bring a sleeping bag and just camp out there, but I did. So we've stayed, friends all these years and decades. He went on to ABC Television, that since has retired from ABC Television. And, as I said, I just was in Los Angeles a couple months ago and saw him, and he's been here to my studio. But, along the way, Humberto Gatica, Roger Nichols, Reggie Dozier, Barney Perkins, some of these names are on my bio. Roy Halley, they were all engineers that I was fortunate enough to get to sit next to and watch. Al Schmidt,
one of the best.
Bill States. The only one really is, it's almost like a smaller list to say I never got to actually sit and work with Bruce Swedien, and there were maybe a few others, but I was very fortunate that I got to work with pretty much all the greats through the 70s and 80s.
Now, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Bob is not only an amazing producer, he's a great mentor and a great friend. So please join me in giving him a big thanks for taking the time to share his stories with us. And thank you for taking the time to hang with me here. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. You can do that and find the links to everything mentioned over at jfranzi.com/episode 28. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Jay Franzi Show. Make sure you visit us at jfranzi.com. Follow, connect, and say hello. This episode has been brought to you by VR Knives, your source for 100% custom knives made by a true rock star. So, if you're in the market for a new piece of art, reach out to VR Knives. 407-421-5528. 407-421-5528.